Well, here we are again with another Hell of a Boss review that is not only bound to make some people mad, but also surprise my own fan base because, believe it or not, I don't hate this episode. But at the same time, it's not nearly as good as the overzealous Hell of a Boss fan base would like you to believe. So, as always, I'm going to do a summary of what happens in the episode, so if you want to get straight to the review, skip to the time displayed on screen. The episode begins with a flashback to when Blitz and Fizzarolli were teenagers and going to a Mammon concert. Mammon announces that he is going to begin a contest for a clown to become his apprentice and a new face for his brand. On the way home, Fizz gushes about how badly he wants to win that contest, while Blitz isn't exactly enthusiastic, as he has become disillusioned with Mammon after the concert. Their conversation is interrupted as an overpassionate fan of Fizzarolli's ambushes him trying to pitch a joint performance between the two and instantly makes Fizz uncomfortable. Blitz defends Fizz from the fan and Fizz shrugs the fan off, turning him into a hater of Fizz. The flashback ends and we are brought to the present where Fizzarolli is preparing for the annual clown contest being hosted by Mammon. Fizzarolli is visually distressed and stressed out, and Asmodeus tries to convince him not to participate, but of course Fizz doesn't listen to reason. This prompts Asmodeus to call Blitz and hire him to help convince Fizz to stop caring about the competition. Blitz accepts the job, and later at the competition, as Fizz is barely able to keep his cool at the fan meet and greet, he is confronted by the overzealous fan from years ago who has spent his life slandering Fizz's career. Blitz defends Fizz, but he still has a panic attack and retreats to his dressing room to prepare for the finale. Asmodeus rushes to comfort him and presses Fizz on why he cares so much about winning the competition, and Fizz says that he feels like if he loses the competition, that makes him unworthy of being with Asmodeus. Asmodeus and Fizz then have a romantic musical number together, cheering Fizz up and motivating him to perform for the finale. At the end of the song, the overzealous fan breaks into the dressing room with a knife and tries to attack Fizz, but is quickly killed by Blitz, who at the same time discovers that Fizz and Asmodeus love each other. Back on stage, Fizz performs his finale song and announces her retirement, which Mammon doesn't take kindly to, and Mammon confronts Fizz on the stage and Asmodeus comes to his defense. Mammon attempts to blackmail Asmodeus into making sure Fizz doesn't quit by threatening to tell the audience that Fizz and Asmodeus love each other, but Asmodeus beats him to it, officially admitting it and taking away any leverage Mammon has over him. After Mammon leaves, Asmodeus, Fizzarolli, and Blitz leave as well in a car together, ending the episode. This episode continues right where Oops left off, with developing Fizz as a character. At first, I thought his personality in this episode of being a spineless pushover was inconsistent with the snarky one that we saw in the previous episodes, but then I realized he simply cannot handle stressful situations, which we briefly saw in Oops, and he's only snarky when he was interacting with Blitz. In reality, he's one of the most insecure, nervous characters in the show, as he has always been like this, like we saw in the flashback of when he was a teenager being confronted by the overzealous fan. And I think a big reason why I didn't notice that until now is that when you think about it, we have almost never actually seen Fizzarolli's true personality. Throughout the entirety of the 3 episodes he's been in, he has been influenced by other characters, with him being aggressive towards Blitz, him being in love with Asmodeus, and him vying for approval from Mammon. This is possibly the worst flaw this character has, and this episode really highlighted it, with the only time we ever actually get to see the true Fizz is in the flashbacks and his revolt against Mammon. So in one way, the episode improved the character by showing who he truly is, but by doing so, it just put more of a focus on how little we get to see of the real Fizz, since he's always accompanied by Asmodeus or Blitz, or in the rare instances when he is alone, within this episode he's obsessing over Mammon's approval. Speaking of Mammon, he is a really enjoyable and entertaining villain and had some of the best lines in the episode.
Ah, you're a bloody legend, Fizzy! They're gonna wanna fuck you! Like you're fucking my heart with joy right now!
He's a villain through and through, and it's nice to see one of the deadly sins actually be a villain and an obstacle to be overcome. Unfortunately, he shares the same issue with the other sins, where they all have really shallow and one-note personalities, but to make matters worse, this goes double for Mammon since he's also a villain. There's been an ongoing issue with Hell of Boss's villains being cartoonishly evil with little to no nuance, and Mammon is just another example of that. I also have to mention how banal it is that sins like gluttony and lust that are celebrated in the modern day are made into good sins, while greed is a villain and is looked down upon like it has always been. You can make gluttony into a skinny party girl, but greed is just a guy who's obsessed with merchandising? Come on, Vivian. While on the topic of sins, we might as well discuss Lust himself, Asmodeus. I hate Asmodeus. He's just Millie all over again. He only exists to obsess over Fizz and has nothing else going for him as a character except for him trying to keep their love a secret, which is now no longer a plot point since he admits his love to all of hell. I don't even want to spend that much time on this character. Every single criticism you have heard about Millie can be applied to Asmodeus, with the only difference being that Millie is more charming. Funnily enough, the most charming characters in this episode were the Clown Sisters, not only for their stunning designs, but also because they are just clown demon versions of Panty and Stocking.
Like we care what your opinion is, Fizza. Roddy.
Shut up! I was thinking of one!
Should have been faster.
Whore!
Slow ass bitch.
Heard what I said! I'm not going anywhere with that goddamn waste of space whore! Who the fuck are you calling a whore? Hey, fuck off!
They weren't needed, but the little screen time they do have always benefited whatever scene they were in, and acted as a good foil to Fizzarolli, giving him a subplot to focus on so he wasn't always a nervous wreck throughout the entirety of the episode. I really hope we do get to see more of these two, cause Fizz needs a threat that isn't one of the most powerful beings in hell, and these two serve that purpose perfectly. Lastly, Blitz's role in this episode is similar to how he was in X's and O's, playing a supporting role. And just like in X's and O's, he excels at it. And I think for the first time ever, Blitz serves as the voice of reason, calling out Fizzarolli for his insecurities, Asmodeus for his hypocrisy, and Mammon for his manipulation. Blitz essentially vocalizes what the viewer is thinking, and although he wasn't a necessary addition to the episode, he certainly didn't harm it in any way, so I have no problem with him. But you know what did harm this episode? Not the actual quality itself, but the reaction to it? This child. Look, I don't hate the deaf kid. It added some serious emotional beats, which is something Hello Boss as a whole could use more of, as long as it isn't related to the ships. But I do have to agree that the deaf kid supporting Fizz is so forced that it almost feels like a parody of something that belongs in a Christmas movie from the early 2000s. This child didn't warrant the amount of controversy this episode received because of him, but man does he feel out of place. So at this point, given my opinion on the deaf kid, I'm sure you think you know my stance on the obsessive fan. Well, sorry to disappoint, but I actually thought he was a good idea that was just executed poorly. Firstly, I am fully aware that this character is supposed to represent people like me, as is on brand with what I know of Vivian's spiteful attitude.
And you can read all about it on my review blog, fuckfizzbutnotinasexyway.complainer.com.org.gov.
But ignoring that, I really like the overly obsessive fan trope, but there is already so much going on for Fizzarolli that he just doesn't feel like a necessary addition to the episode. But just imagine if this fan was a fan of Blitz instead of Fizzarolli. Maybe it would have been too much to pack into this episode, but an exploration of Blitz getting a taste of fame from his only remaining fan could have been a great opportunity to explore his character more, especially if the fan's reason for being there was to assassinate Fizz because he believes that he stole the spotlight from Blitz's career. This would have given an opportunity for Blitz to show that he's willing to throw away not only the past, but his pride and taste of fame that he once desired for the sake of protecting Fizz, even if that means killing the only fan he has left from his circus days. Like I said, this subplot could have been really good if it had just been executed differently. Thankfully, the flashback scene exists that not only shows us Fizz's true personality, but also what a good friend Blitz was to him. Scenes like this are exactly what I was talking about in my review of Oops, where we need more flashbacks just like this to build up to the resolution between Fizz and Blitz. This seems to be a reoccurring issue with Fizz as a character, since once again a big part of his character is his relationship with Mammon, which is mostly introduced and resolved in the same episode. It would have been nice to get an episode to establish and build up to Fizzerali conquering his fear of Mammon before this episode released, since now that he's made up with Blitz and stood up to Mammon, there's really not much left for this character to do. His story feels like it came to an end within 2 episodes. Which, by the way, having 2 Asmodeus and Fizzerali episodes back to back was a terrible idea, and I would be content with not having to see either of these characters throughout the rest of the season. I also got to mention how absurd it was that there are technically 4 songs in this episode, and that they all ranged from being good to really good. The Clown Sisters song was jaw-dropping in its presentation and the song itself. Fizzerali's 2 minutes notice was effectively triumphant and cinematic. The entire clown contest being narrated in a form of a song was so unnecessary yet enjoyable, and reminded me how much effort Helluva Boss puts into the little things, even if they don't need to. And the love song between Fizz and Asmodeus is pretty hard to enjoy if you don't like the ship, but as much as I hate to admit it, it did get stuck in my head. All in all, this episode was by no means amazing, and landed more in the above average category. It equally has too much going on and not enough going on at the same time, with there being Blitz as a bodyguard, the deaf kid, the Clown Sisters, Fizz getting developed as a character, and the introduction of Mammon. It's a lot to juggle, and the only thing that was really handled well out of all of those was Fizz's development as a character, which was the important part of the episode, so I got to give Vivian credit for adequately handling the focus of the entire episode. But every other subplot was kinda just tacked on with not much thought put into how to handle it or how to make it interesting enough to be worth having in the episode. The mid-season special of Helluva Boss seemed to focus more on what has worked in Helluva Boss and what hasn't, and adapted from there. Helluva Boss has always been more focused on character development instead of telling a captivating narrative, and this episode understood that and focused on developing Fizzerali's character by having the whole episode revolve around him, which hurt every other part of the episode in the process. And as for the comedy, well, there really wasn't much, but that also means that the sex jokes were kept to a minimum, which was the right move to make. I consider this episode a win for Helluva Boss, but if this show ever wants to gain back the reputation it once had, it's going to have to do a lot better than this, but it is still a step in the right direction.
Because I'm not gonna lie, women just ain't funny.
I wadded up 5 in a slim fit condom.
There's dicks in the walls. Oh, that's fucking hilarious.
Is the giant statue of yourself also a classic, or?
Oh, yeah, Billy.
He's got the biggest cock, you know? Like massive. I mean, imagine, like, the biggest.